you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The other week, here we go, sorry. The other week, my mother was rearranging furniture at home in her living kitchen and thrown out the playpen that the grandchildren had grown out of. And this is me and my branch of the family tree, if you like. In place of the playpen, she thought the old roll-top desk out of the farm office would look nice. And she set about clearing it out. And whilst doing this, she found an old scrapbook about my father starting his career as a first-generation dairy farmer. When reading it, I became somewhat disheartened for a moment. It's kind of a funny thing being a second-generation dairy farmer. He's the one with the best stories, the glory, if you like. Not that we haven't done anything in the last 15 years or so. But it doesn't really help when the likes of Tom Rawson saying, oh, your dad's one of my farming heroes, and then in the next breath saying, you're a bit in your comfort zone. So anyway, I applied for Nuffield, and I'd like to give thanks to the Yorkshire Agricultural Society for their generous sponsorship. And it was a chance for me to explore these relevant areas in pastoral dairy farming. Marketing, production techniques, and sustainability, including carbon footprint issues. From a personal point of view, I was interested in cheese production, and I've met many cheesemakers around the world, where methods of milk production varied in importance when it came to marketing. But it was whilst walking and talking with this Australian cheesemakers that I realised that there's such a high level of dedication and commitment in this craft. And I'm not ready for that in a diversification project, so I'm not rushing to be a cheesemaker. But what about the wider industry? Well, I have had some brilliant tours, including Fonterra Food Research Laboratories in New Zealand, and the Australian equivalent, CSIRO. And there is much evidence of the nutritional advantages of grass-based milk products. There are high levels of vitamin A, E and D, and there are more favourable omega-3 to 6 ratios, and there are high levels of the newly acclaimed conjugated linoleic fatty acids, or CLAs. However, Dr. Mary Augustine of CSIRO did say that it is the general goodness of milk that can be marketed from grass, rather than focusing on specifics, due to the high cost of analysis and the volatility and changeability of things like CLAs. But grazing is being used by the marketplace more and more, and not necessarily for nutritional benefits. Most recent examples would include Friesland Campina, and I quote, €45 million a year will be spent on incentives in response to the considerable demand among Dutch consumers to preserve our typical Dutch landscape with cows grazing naturally on green pastures. Closer to home, Morrison's is openly advocating the benefits of grazed grass and have just commissioned a superb British Grassland Society booklet to help all its producers. Then there's the pressure groups, whose modern, just slightly left of centre approach can have a really credible influence. Compassioning well farming is being quite a thorn in the side of dairies and producer groups, aiming to establish that all cows should have at least some time spent in grass. The World Society for the Protection of Animals have just brought out a paper with valuable input from Neil Darwin's Nuffield scholar, outlining some issues in the economics of dairying and concluding in favour of grazing systems. Anyway, that's enough about marketing, and let me tell you why. I happen to have a supermarket contract, but if I wasn't, I would be lobbying, fighting tooth and nail, if you like, for that extra penny. That's just the reality of the marketplace. On Monday, I'm having my second annual carbon evaluation. My first evaluation concluded apparently that it was about as low as a grass-based system could be, and yet I knew myself of areas for improvement. Since then, numerous evaluations have taken place across the country, and it is evident that any production level can offer the lowest carbon footprints, as long as it's efficient. Just as an aside, it will be interesting to see if our first year's wind turbine production will be offset by the folly of having a couple of overfed belted Gallagher. But my culling figures are better this year, and this should continue long term with the use of Swedish Reds across my New Zealand Friesians to further reduce culling for cell counts and re-inject some hybrid vigour. This decision was based upon research I learnt about at Moore Park in Ireland on my Nuffield travel. Carbon footprinting is useful to highlight inefficiencies in any system, but I have great reservations in how it is used at the point of sale. A litre of pop can apparently be a more environmentally purchased than a litre of milk, as it doesn't take into account the nutrient density of dairy products. What is also annoying is the way carbon equivalents from finite resources, such as fuel, are weighted equally with those from natural, sustainable sources, i.e. the rumen. But I would like to move on to production techniques, and therefore the profit and resilience aspect of sustainability. Quite simply, the best results from grazing in the countries I have visited followed rotational grazing rules to maximise yield, utilisation and quality of the sward, aiming to match cow and herd requirements, and bearing in mind that other feed inputs will generally have a negative impact on grazing performance. Now, I have great enthusiasm for rotational grazing methodology, and much of this is outlined in my report. But I want to now move on to resilience. And to me, this means having the ability to rely on the profit driver on grazing grass without relying on external inputs. As international dairy consultant and statistician John Roche evaluates, 70% of the variation in profit levels can be directly attributed to expenditure on inputs, 70%. Some exceptional examples of reduced inputs were seen on my travels. In Pennsylvania, the Amish are farming with limited mechanisation, and yet the area that is found by this community is increasing significantly. In Ireland, the credit crisis has restricted borrowing. Moore Park Research Centre's production blueprint has spearheaded improvements in profitability using grazed forage. In Chile, due to volatility in input costs and milk price, and obviously no single farm payments, Sven Bergstrom milks 1,400 cows with fixed capital similar to the cost of one 60-cow robotic milking system, 1,400 cows. And it was done using mobile milking bales and had many spin-off advantages. For example, there was virtually no lameness in his Holstein herd. Bought-in feeds. Well, New Zealand has led the way in developing a profit-driven grass-based dairy industry. Replicated in virtually all the countries on my travels, including autumn calving versions. Organics. In France, Australia and across England, I've talked with many organic producers. And it is here where I can look at weaning myself off the dependence of fertiliser, which is very difficult, as new layers of perennial ryegrass respond so well to nitrogen. We are making smaller applications, reducing overall usage, which in turn complements the clover percentage in the sward. And growth will also be aided by the mycorrhizal fungi inoculants we have applied at reseeding, which has a symbiotic relationship with the plant roots. We're also trying mixed swards, including things like chicory as well as legumes. And the different root structures can better utilise available nutrients and water and improve soil structure. What about for me? Well, I will put more energy into the wider industry. Last year I was re-elected onto the Arla Regional Board, and the British Grassland Society's Grazing the Initiative project, which I'm a mentor in, could really take off, aiming to reverse this worrying trend of reduced milk from forage. My Nuffield Scholarship has made me feel more equipped for this kind of work. I've put myself forward for an NSch Farming Ambassadors course this winter. We'll just have to see what happens. At home, I've mentioned some tweaks and twiddles, if you like, but I would like to stress that I am confident of my future as a relatively small, grass-based dairy farmer. By the way, this winter's projects include a bit of hedge laying behind those heifers of mine, a couple of 100 metres, maybe another one as well, and a bit more walling. Being a grazier gets you out into the farmed environment, and like many, many such people I have met across the world, I have a passion for enhancing this environment. All in all, I've really enjoyed my Nuffield, I'm really enjoying life, and I hope you've enjoyed this presentation.